As you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode and not just good TV. I'm Dying.
And I'm Paul.
And this week we watched the Star Trek The Next Generation Season 6, Episode 9, titled The Quality of Life.
This episode, you're going to read the blurb. What's the blurb?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
When LaForge is assigned to survey a new mining development, Dr. Farallon?
I don't think they ever said
Farallon.
Yeah.
Farallon, not a doctor.
Not a doctor. Shh.
Fremulon.
By the way, is that the guy in Parks and Rec? The guy that plays whatever? I can never remember his name. But the guy who says in that company tag at the end of whatever we're talking about, is that the guy from Parks and Rec? Whoever says that? The voiceover?
Nick Offerman? Ron Swanson?
Fremulon.
It's got to be Nick Offerman. Got to be.
Cool. All right, so this episode was,
anyway.
I enjoyed the episode. I thought that it was really good how they did the callbacks with Data.
So I have a bit of a dilemma because this episode has no B plot.
No, it does.
It doesn't.
It does.
I will fight you. We will fight you.
No, it totally does. The B plot. The B plot is the exocomp.
Is the B plot Beverly Crusher phoning it in? Or is
No, the B plot is Beverly Crusher she had Kramer cameos where she just she's like, I thought I'd find you down here. Oh, I'm sorry, doctor. Is there something you needed? No, I just haven't been on the show in a really long time, and I thought maybe I should wander on camera.
I don't think there were two B plots. I think it transitions. I think the A plot sort of transitions from one to the other. So at first, it seems like it's about this station with this particle fountain.
See, and I feel like the fact that you're saying it seems like means that was one of the plots. Because they did have to figure that out.
Right, it's abandoned, though. It becomes the setting. Like if there was a sword fight in the middle of a sports arena, it's the B plot is not that they're in a sports arena. They're just in the sports arena.
Right, but it's still resolved at the end. There was a conflict that was presented. If we go by our original criteria, then Data's plot would be the B plot because it's the personal development. But I think you're right. I mean, the title of the episode would then be the B plot, which is weird. But what
if it actually was the B plot?
Just every single time. Maybe they should do that with Lower Decks, the new Star Trek.
It'd be it could be not the B plot. That would be some of the titles some of the time. It could be either the B plot or not the B plot.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, literally.
Right. So this episode,
this would be the B plot.
Right.
B.
Yeah.
B-E.
Yeah. Right.
This is going on way too long.
Yeah.
We got to move on immediately.
I feel like,
but I don't think that it doesn't split equal time, right? It doesn't bounce back and forth between the two plots. Yes, there is this weird ticking clock.
Picard says, I think it's worth putting in a little bit more time to make sure that your results are going to be the best that they can be. But keep in mind, I do still have to present my report, and they are expecting it by a certain time. I'm sure that they will give an extension because of what you're saying, but they're not just going to say, okay, when you're ready.
Right.
So, yes, there is that ticking clock. I feel like it's a justified ticking clock. It's not just, it's getting kind of late. We've been out here for 3 days now. We should probably go.
Right.
They're running out of chips.
You have cards to play.
Yeah. No, he never goes. Remember?
Yeah, but what? I mean, at what point? Okay, so yes, you're right. It is a personal plot for Data, but that is also the main plot. It becomes the main plot,
right? So I'm totally agreeing with you that the exocomps are the main plot, but I still think that the B plot, even if it gets cast to the side, like the darts, it's still the B plot.
Yes, but nothing happens. Okay, to use that excellent specimen of a Star Trek episode.
Yes.
Shakar, I believe it was.
It was. Yes. Good job.
Remember that. Yeah. Even then, none of the other plot takes place. It's not like they have to go through quarks in a gunfight, right? Or even then, right? It is completely separated.
Okay, so then what about episode 10, Fascination, where the O'Brien's plot, you felt it was so intertwined with the Joy Festival that it wasn't the B plot, but they were surrounded. The B plot the main plot was the setting to the B plot. Like they didn't interact with the Joy Festival at all until the very end.
Jonathan, you told me we would never speak of Fascination ever again. And here we are.
Sorry, it's on my mind right now for reasons I can't tell our viewers, our listeners.
We're talking about NextGen, right?
Yes.
The epitome of science fiction.
Yes.
Which this definitely is littered with science fiction.
Yes.
Examples of science fiction.
Yes.
This
was a sci-fi for sure.
For me, yes. But the fact that it lacks a B plot, I'm still disagreeing with you. I'm going to fight you tooth and nail, whatever that means.
I still believe that they are two separate plots. No matter how intertwined they are, no matter how shoved aside.
They're not even intertwined. It's just a setting. I mean, the station and the particle fountain ultimately has no bearing on what happens in the show.
The particle fountain is the whole reason the exocomps show their intelligence.
Right, but it's almost like a MacGuffin. It's a reason for them to be there, right? There's nothing being gained dramatically other than it is the place in which all of this is happening. It's not a plot, it's a setting.
But the plot is the particle fountain. Like that's what they were going to see. The exocomp was an added bonus. And the particle fountain is having issues and they're trying to fix them using the exocomps.
But see, okay, so I will agree with you that by the first or second act or whatever, when I lose track. But it is the main plot because that's what they're talking about. But then they have these, they have they introduce the exocomp and then it becomes the main plot. And then they never really talk about the particle fountain ever again in any kind of substance other than it's sort of this looming thing that has to be decided.
The fact that they're still talking about it means that it's still a plot that needs to be resolved. Like they don't just drop it and like if they dropped it and the whole thing was about the exocomp, then I would agree with you. But the fact that we had what was her name? Hendon or whatever, the
Farallon?
No, the nurse lady from the Zephyr Cochrane episode. Like that was the B plot, was her getting sick and trying to figure out what to do with her, and they had a throwaway line that resolved it. They'll get another ambassador.
Right. But we made an exception in that episode because the original series usually has no B plot, and we were grasping at straws to try and like weed one out. But in this case, a show where there are almost always, except for this episode, a B plot that is very well defined.
I'll tell you what, we'll put a pin in it. So if this is the only episode that doesn't have a B plot, you have to concede that it has a B plot and it is what I say it is. If there are other episodes that have no B plot, then we can go back to this argument that this one didn't have a B plot.
I'll think about it.
Okay, you got 13 years.
Okay, so we have to talk about this thing at the very beginning. So we can start talking about the show now. So it opens up with a card game. And the doctor at some point starts ragging on the dudes for having a beard because they all have beards. And for some reason, Geordi has a beard. And I don't remember. Maybe you have some trivia about this.
I do.
I don't know if he ever has a beard later in the show.
So,
or is this by itself?
So he did grow a beard off season, and he was getting married, and his wife wanted him to have a beard. And there was an episode before this where he did have it, and then he shaved it, and it was never addressed. So he had a beard, and then the next day he didn't, and that was kind of the end of it. So this time, to try and weave it a little bit more into the story, they actually do address it, and then when he loses it, they address it again. So there was a little bit more continuity with it rather than it just randomly being there.
Oh, okay. Made sense.
Yes, but it's also, okay, so they're off duty, so I guess I could see the point in the conversation, but people who are growing their beard don't always talk about it. Like, it's just a thing that's happening, and then if they decide against it, they shave it. Like, I didn't think it was anything that needed to be addressed on the show. And if there was anybody complaining about the fact that there was one episode where Geordi grew a beard and the next episode he didn't have it, like, not everything about, like, people get haircuts all the time.
Yeah.
Janeway changed her hair completely and nobody talked about it.
She would have beards left and right, and no one ever talked about it.
She was constantly.
No one ever mentions it.
She had a goatee. She had the Maverick, mutton chops.
Great. Now we have to go into all of Voyager and put beards on her. Like, we have so much work to do for memes.
Man, this episode is just causing so much work.
Well, Well, it just struck me that she was so anti-beard, and that, like, she was so anti-beard that she's super disappointed because she obviously had the winning hand in this card game.
Yeah.
And first of all, I didn't realize they were still in the middle of a hand that they made this bet. Like, how stupid do you have to be that when somebody gets to the middle of a hand and then makes this crazy bet and accepts the crazy bet?
Oh, that's...
You don't do that. You don't do that.
No, people don't. Real people don't, but movie people do all the time.
So they have that weird exchange that never comes back. It's never a thing. It's not even. It doesn't even really set up the theme of the show or the episode.
Yeah,
it just is
true.
this. It's this random cold open where the doctor is being kind of an a-hole.
Yeah.
So they get to the station. Man, we're only on the second scene. This is going to be a really long podcast. And the only thing that happens is they set up the whole thing, and Geordi's always super grumpy when he talks about, like, when he's not in charge. Geordi has these things where he's, like, super nice or he's being a dick.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no in between. He's never just sort of neutral Geordi.
Right.
He was Dick Geordi.
Dick Dixon.
He was Dick
Gossip.
Geordi,
Dick Geordi.
Yeah.
Yep. We're good.
And then he meets Farallon, who has this weird... I don't know if we've ever met her particular race before, but she has, like, the bridge of her nose looks like a vagina.
Sure, okay.
All the nerds are like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's a vagina.
Okay, and so something happens. They send in the exocomp. It fixes the thing. And what struck me as weird is, like, why is Geordi so amazed that a robot went and fixed something? Like, he lives in the future. Like, he's surrounded by things that automatically do stuff all the time.
Right.
Like, this can't be the first time that humans sent a robot in to do something a human couldn't do, and it did it.
Well, no, I don't.
Like,
I don't think that was the part. It was the fact that it didn't know what the problem was. Like, it didn't. It went in without the tool, and it replicated the tool to use.
Why is that? Why that? I mean, that doesn't seem that out of the ordinary.
Yeah, given all the technology that's around them, it seems like this should have been invented at least 100 years ago,
or at least not. He's an engineer on the flagship.
Yeah,
flagship on the flagship starship, and something like that should be, at least he should know. He would have read about it in the journals,
right? But she was saying, like, she hasn't showed anybody this. It's one of 3 prototypes. She's waiting to, and she was kind of talking about, like, that's why she hasn't shown anybody, because there've been a couple that have gone rogue like this, and she had to wipe their memories and shut them down.
It took some humans hostage.
Right.
Went rogue. Okay, so then they come aboard. The Farallon. Now I can't not hear that. They come aboard, and Farallon meets Data and kind of wanted her to be like, so Commander Data, where is your remote control? How do you control Lieutenant Commander Data? Because he's a machine and also a robot.
Right.
I can explain it more.
So she was confused by how he was moving?
She was confused that he was acting autonomously, because that would have set up the theme that happens later. Now that everybody's up to date,
right,
we can move on.
Yeah. So, all right, I just need to say, like, I enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a good episode. It's just, there wasn't a whole lot of depth to it, and there wasn't a whole lot of anything to research on my end. Like, there was no behind the scenes trivia. There was no, like, character trivia. Like, I have literally nothing exciting to add, like, as far as layers go, because, like the episode, there are no layers. So it's amazing that we're only, like, not even 20 minutes into the episode. I'm having a hard time staying focused on this podcast because this episode was so disappointing compared to what, like, it's a good episode taken just exactly how we're doing it. Like, we're finding another episode, we're watching it, cool, let's move on. But to know that it's a sequel to The Measure of a Man, and having seen The Measure of a Man, this episode is not good.
See, I have to disagree. I think, and here's why I liked it. I think it is kind of like what we were talking about in our He-Man discussion.
Okay.
Available on Patreon, if you're a Patreon subscriber.
Wait, what?
It's available on Patreon, if you're a Patreon subscriber. If you pay money, you can listen to us talk about He-Man and how, and what if it was a science fiction show. No, we're talking about in that discussion we talk about that there was supposedly a script the He-Man writers had written where nothing happens. They talk. They sit there and talk. Skeletor.
Yep.
Skeletor never shows up. It's just a nothing happens. The one where nothing happens.
Right.
And I said that's what science fiction should be. And that's why I love this episode, because it's just a bunch of science fiction stuff where nothing happens, right? Because, for example, the perfect scene to illustrate this is when they beam aboard and Farallon is enamored with Data and starts asking him all these questions about his construction, and Geordi's left carrying the exocomp. And I was surprised at how long they stayed where they're sort of trailing off, walking into the distance, Data and Farallon, while Geordi is just sort of following them, kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, I thought we were like members of Starfleet. And so, but they hung on it for so long. I was like, oh, this is great. This is what I want my science fiction to be, where it's just two people techno-babbling about something that is relevant and somebody carrying a piece of tech, right?
Just that's like the dream.
It wasn't cut up for any, like they were just like, this is the episode. Right? We're just going to let this sit for a second. And I think that's why I understand why you say it doesn't have a lot of depth. It doesn't, right? But the depth comes from the exploration of this tech. Like, I loved it. It was a Data episode.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
This is totally a Data episode. Not insofar that it is a sequel to The Measure of a Man, but that as well, but also that he's Dick Data. Right? He's just being a detective trying to prove his theory.
Right.
And it's just, I love it. I love Data. Like, this is why I love Data.
Yeah, no, and I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying. Like I said, I think it was a good episode. And it absolutely it played in the universe that it's in a way that most episodes don't. So I absolutely agree with you that it was a good episode. And you're agreeing with me that it just didn't have any layers. So, I mean, let's keep going and let's see where we can discuss it. It was just so straightforward that I feel like there's not really going to be a whole lot of like, well, what was interesting to me, and there isn't, spoiler alert, there isn't any, well, did you know? And this is kind of a fun fact. That's not in this episode. I actually was thinking / hoping that the cut shot after Geordi went around that corner while they were talking was when they set down the exocomp, they would continue to be talking about Data and his positronic brain, or so like the conversation had gone on the entire time down that hallway and into the room, and Data's like kind of finishing up some story or something.
What if so their dialogue is fading out as they walk away from the camera and Geordi follows them, and then nothing for like 2 seconds, and then you see Data and Farallon walking back, crossing the same hallway, talking about the same thing, and Geordi is following them still. Like they made the wrong turn.
Right.
Now, what if they made a second lap? They came back again.
Like, come on, guys. Like, where do you want me to put this?
Okay, then we come upon Crusher yet again, where obviously they were contracted to pay her. Yeah, obviously the conceit is that she and Worf were playing some sort of game. But let me put that on its side for a second, because she's like mending herself.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
right.
They're dressed in they're both dressed in geese.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, what were they doing? I think Crusher and Worf are banging, and everything that they said. Now go back and watch it. Makes total sense.
Okay, that's
Crusher and Worf banged in the 6th season.
Changed my mind.
Yeah, and that's why she's all banged up, because
right. Oh yeah, it's rough.
Klingons, they like their rough sex.
Yeah.
By the way, I was going to ask. So, when did Data make? I forgot her name, but when he made Lol, yeah,
Lol, LOL.
There's a joke in there somewhere.
I think season 4.
Oh, so he says to somebody, forgot, either it was Picard or I would think it's Picard, where he says, "I do not reproduce, yet I am still alive." Like, he did reproduce.
Well, kind.
He used his own positronic whatever. I mean, they make it clear that this was not just an invention, but a reproduction of himself.
Right.
So I don't know, like, is this just an oversight?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, probably because he's saying I can't procreate by choice in the way that, everybody else does. There's no bang bangity bang going on.
I guess so. I don't know. It seems like an oversight to me. Or I feel like he wouldn't have said it that way.
Right. No,
he says, I do not reproduce.
Right.
That's what he says.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean,
yeah. No, I feel like it can be viewed both ways. So I'm totally willing to I either give him the benefit of the doubt or see it as an oversight.
You don't care.
Well, I mean,
we just need to move on. We need to move on.
No, I mean, but so to what? I mean, are you just pointing out a continuity error, or was there a point to the fact?
No,
that,
it struck me that he said that,
right.
and he'd already had a tragedy of his reproduction.
Well, right. So here's the thing about Law. Like, immediately after she died, she has been like completely forgotten, other than being stored in Data's memory bank, like which he took her memory chips and put them in him, which I didn't remember until just now. But she's also like completely forgotten in Picard. She's mentioned one sentence in passing where Picard says something like, Data always wanted a daughter. And in that episode, he says, like, I'm leaving it up to it to decide whether or not it wants to be a boy or a girl. So, he did not always want a daughter. He didn't really care one way or the other.
Can I do some Beverly Crusher bashing real quick?
Please.
So she's the only actor who never really seems to buy into the world for me. She always seems like she's kind of mugging the camera, like she knows she's on a TV show, and not in the way that, for example, Picard buys into the world and Data buys into the world, right? You believe that they're there, right?
Sure.
But she always just seems like it just doesn't feel like she cares, right? And I never get that. There's never an episode that I've ever seen where I feel like she is part of this Star Trekian world. She just seems too self-aware.
Well, I mean, I guess the fact that I'm thinking about it, my answer is no. But because I don't think I've ever given it a whole lot of thought. I see what you're saying. It's less about her feeling like all the other characters seem like they are in the Star Trek universe, and she seems like she's on a TV show about the Star Trek universe.
And I'm not saying that she's necessarily a bad actor either.
Right. No. I get it. There's a little bit less of a believability from her when she's spouting anything. But I feel like that's more speaking to her in general. And I don't know if it was an actor's choice or a direction choice, because I mean, think about all the things that she talks about that don't have to do with, she's talking to Data, and she's giving these lines, and you're saying like you weren't really feeling it from her, but none of the things that she said were Star Trek based. She's saying, like, I guess in simple terms, like, this is what would define something living, like, and anybody could say that, but she conveys it in a way that you feel is just one degree of separation from how everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, I don't believe that she believes it. I guess that's maybe that's an acting thing. I don't know, but I believe that she's reading the script.
Right. That's
what the script says, or she's not imparting. Maybe it's not her fault necessarily, but there's not a lot of character.
The episode where everybody disappears on the ship. That's a great episode, and I feel like she does a great job with it. I don't feel like that is an episode where she is acting like she's on a TV show. I feel like she is genuinely concerned about what is happening around her, and she cannot figure it out.
That is a good episode. You're right.
And so maybe it's just more that maybe it's just her cadence, like how she says things. It just doesn't come across in a way that appears to be genuine.
It could be that. It could be. I mean, whenever she does technobabble, it always feels, I've said this before, it always feels like she's just barely able to get it out.
Right.
She's just barely able, either memorizing it or like not stumbling over the words, which I know that they all had problems with. You can watch amazing behind the scenes stuff about it.
So Data's asking about his life, like what constitutes living. To Beverly, like so this episode, like just taking at face value is, it's a great story, blah, blah, blah. But if you know anything about the characters, like Data would not be talking to the doctor about it. I mean, maybe the question about the value, like what constitutes living, and then throwing out fire as like a counterpoint and kind of hearing her thoughts on it. But every other thing about investigating, I mean, 3 episodes later, again, I'm only saying this because Netflix is up right now, but the thumbnail has Data and Geordi as Sherlock and Watson. Like, it's Data and Geordi. That's who does these things. So, the fact that he's going to Crusher, he wouldn't. He'd be going to Geordi saying, you're the engineer. You need to be looking at this. You know how I work. Take a look at this thing. Like, he would not be going to Dr. Crusher about it.
Thinking back on it, I can see why Data would want to go to a doctor, right?
Sure.
Because there's nobody who knows about life more than a doctor would.
Right.
But the conversation that they have is not one that I think that a doctor would say. I would feel like you'd want to have, I want my doctor to give me, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me a doctor, the doctor, I would tell you, well, it's this, and this when cells divide and that you give them food and you give them a very technical answer.
Right.
Or then you could say, or if you talk to a philosopher, they might say, and then give a very philosophical answer, right? You do it that way. That doesn't happen.
Right.
Right? She doesn't come to it as a doctor, which is the sole reason that Data probably went to her in the first place.
Right.
Pulaski would have given us a great answer.
Right.
Right? It would have been a great medical, this is why this happens. And this is what we consider to be a lie. Like, Data's not the first person to ask this to a doctor, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So there must be something, especially because Picard says in the show, the sole or the primary mission of this ship is to seek out new life.
Right.
And so the fact that she doesn't have an answer ready to go tells me they should fire her immediately and bring on somebody else.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah. Bring back Pulaski.
What? You won't return my phone calls? What's a phone call? Okay.
Who's talking there?
I don't know. It's for you to decide.
Okay. Listener.
Don't call me that. I hate it when you call me that. I love Data. I just love all this Data stuff. I wish every episode was about Data. So, by the way, there's like 4 Captain's Log act openers in this. Is that normal? That can't be normal.
It's not normal, but it's not uncommon with Next Generation. Okay. There was a lot of not only bringing up to speed, but being able to hear the captain's insight into what was happening, which I felt kind of happened in this one a little bit, especially with the last one. He's like, this is why. Well, yeah, this is why I'm down on the base, because I'm doing the final inspection to give my report. Like, it's here's the voiceover explaining the scene change, so we don't have to have that in dialogue.
Right. Yeah, which works.
Yeah,
works great.
Yeah, I mean, having a captain's log is a genius way of legitimately providing plot and information to the audience without having to throw it into dialogue. And it's a way that absolutely makes sense in the world. A captain would need a captain's log.
Yeah. It's when they're doing it in the middle of a battle, right? Like
where the captain steps off to the side and just pulls out his pad.
Yeah. And it's in present tense. It's not like he's making a log for later when they won. He's making it when they're in a shootout, like sometimes. Not in this episode, but
yeah,
it has
I'm
happened.
very curious to know like which episode you're referring to. Like
it happened. It may not happen in this show. It may happen in other Star Trek shows, but there are times where there will be a captain's log, and you will literally see 2 ships shooting at each other, and someone's having taking the time to make a captain's
that kind
log.
of shootout. I thought you meant like on a planet firing phasers at each other.
Well, I mean, whatever kind of shooting you're doing, then is not the time to start making a captain's log.
Right.
Right.
No. I agree. Yeah. No, and I think you're right. I think there are times. Well, yeah. I'm thinking of like yesterday's Enterprise. I think that's the name of the episode.
Yes. Yeah.
Where,
good episode.
But it's almost like a Mexican standoff. So nobody's firing at anybody, and that's when there's a captain's log.
Right.
If I'm remembering right. Oh man,
which
I hope
makes
we get
sense.
To that episode soon.
Well, eventually we will.
Well, I know.
Soon. People are going to know that we actually do randomly generate episodes because all we do is bitch about how we get the crappy ones.
Yeah.
Just anybody.
No.
Wait.
Sorry, there is something a simulation. The simulation
yes.
of the proton or the
whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing.
Yeah. The protabolizer was about to negulate. And so they send it in. And what was really cool about this, I don't know if you went back and watched it, but when he said like it'll take him 60 seconds, it was 60 seconds, give or take a second, like on every time he counted down. So that's
awesome.
Yeah, and with editing, that is such a pain in the butt to do.
That's interesting. So did you time it yourself?
Yeah. So the 50 seconds or the 20 seconds to 10 seconds, I think actually felt like 10 seconds. So I was very curious if it was that, especially because of the tense music. And so I went back and I watched the timer on the play feed as it went, and yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so they do the experiment, and they at first initially think that it's not alive because it fails the experiment, and then Data runs his experiments, and then the crap hits the fan, and Geordi and Picard are trapped, and they have 23 minutes to get them out.
Yes.
And they want to send in the exocomps to destroy themselves, which will fix the problem. Data says, nuh-uh. And he gives the explanation as to why they didn't actually fail the test. Data does.
Yes.
Riker's like, I don't care. We're going to do this. Sorry, Data. And then Data's like, they're not going to go in and destroy themselves because they're sentient. They're not going to do that. I've proven this. And then Farallon is like, okay, I can disconnect their command module so they can't say no.
Right.
And then Riker's, okay, do it. So in that moment, they've just agreed and conceded to Data that he's right. But they're still going to go and murder the exocomps anyway.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
The fact that they're like, oh, Data's right. He just explained it to us. We're going to do it anyway. So they're about to murder like this life form to save Picard and Geordi, who probably would have disagreed with that decision to begin with.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point that I didn't even consider. Like the fact that they were saying we can override that resistance.
Yeah, the fact they're going to say no, that they don't want to go in and kill themselves.
Right.
And Riker is hardcore wanting to do it. He does not
Please
care.
let me.
He does not. Yeah, he's like shaking him by the shoulders.
I mean, which I also get. Like even if you didn't see them as a living being, like they're going to disobey the commands. Okay, well, let's override that so they will do the commands. Like they're machines that have a glitch. They're just being difficult. We need to override that glitch. And even if you argue that like they or Data, saying like I'm right, like Riker is like I've known this machine that can't talk to me for less than a day, and it can save our captain, who I've known for 6 years now. I am absolutely happy to destroy this new life if it means that we can get these two back.
Right. And Farallon also wants to do that, not necessarily because she doesn't care about the exocomps, but because she wants to save her project.
Right.
Which is weird to me because she has basically created another life form. And it would seem to me that your particle fountain crap, like that is totally expendable to having created a new life form, right? She created a new life form.
Yeah.
Yet that's less important to her than her particle fountain. Like how many times have they said we don't understand how Data can exist? And there's basically like a primordial Data in there that they can carry around with them that she made.
Yeah.
And she doesn't think that is going to be more, whether it's altruism or not, whether just she wants a better career, all of those things could be way better for her if she were to take the exocomp as new life part, and who cares about the particle, whatever.
Right. But
fountain.
I mean, she was trying to build a new tool, and she, and now she's being told that she built a life, which I get if that's not your end goal. And it's not because I mean the moment you create life, then you can't patent it, you can't continue to own it, like you can't use it against its will. So I'd be very reluctant to admit that this tool, like I would need concrete evidence, which they get by the end of the episode, that this thing is self-aware, it's learning, it's adapting, and it is trying to preserve itself. I mean, it's like if I was trying to cook some breakfast and I accidentally built a house, and somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! Like, you should move in." I'm like, "Well, but I'm still hungry. Like, I'm disappointed that I built a house because now I'm not eating my cooked eggs.
Right, but surely you'd be willing to forego the one meal for a new place to live, right?
Depends on how bad I wanted the eggs, and she wanted those eggs pretty bad.
I guess it just seems short-sighted to me.
Absolutely.
As a scientist.
Well, yes, and I think at that point, but it's because the end goal was not the intended result, and when you're
but arguably in science it rarely is.
True. And that is definitely a political argument that is just going to be shoved to the side. We're not going to talk about that.
It's not political. It's true. It's a factual thing that people all the time in science are trying. Their intention is sometimes totally separate from their result.
It should absolutely be true. But I think that science has been bought so much that people ignore evidence that doesn't support the results, and they will pigeonhole things to make sure that they are getting the results that they want.
Right. Yes. There are perversions of that.
Yeah.
But in terms of science, like there are multitudes of examples.
Science in its purest form should be that. When you find something new, you don't go.
Is that. It is that. Like that is science. But I see what you're saying, that it is perverted in some ways where they manufacture the result from an intention, which is wrong, and I agree.
Yeah, well, and I think that's what she was doing. She wanted it to be a tool so bad that she wasn't willing to listen to the evidence that it was alive until it was irrefutable and she couldn't ignore it, which is what happened. Which I forgot that one of them sacrificed themselves, so I was actually hoping that one of the exocomps would be like, no, I'm not going. I'm not doing it.
Or the exocomp like holds a human hostage with a knife to its throat and like backs out of the room. Right. It's like, I'm not going.
Yeah, no, that would have been great. Like if there were 4 exocomps, one of them flew off the transporter pad and just stayed off to the side, and the other 3 went down, and then one of them sacrificed themselves.
And so for the rest of the show, you have this exocomp that's hiding on the decks of the Enterprise. And you see it like in the background as they're doing like walk and talk. Like you just see it kind of float by in a hallway.
Just becomes part of the crew.
By the way, how badass would it be to see a Borg assimilated exocomp? Yeah.
That'd be weird.
That'd be awesome. Like if it's a life form, they would assimilate. It's an amazing life form because it can like make tools out of nothing.
Well, but like think about what happened with Data. Like they gave him human skin. So
they just wrap the exocomp in human skin.
It's not assimilation, it's conversion. The problem is they've always met organic matter, so they convert it to a robot. But if they find a robot, they would convert it to organic matter.
Yeah, that's true. So it could be that a lot of the Borg that they encounter are actually robots converted into like this half and half thing that the Borg have to be.
Yeah.
I love it.
Horrifying.
Anyway. Okay, so the exocomps are established to be life forms, and they have that sort of short and sweet debrief with the Doctor, Data, and Picard. And by the way, is Farallon totally phoning it in this scene? I don't know if it's the writing or the acting or both, but she sort of gives these super like high school level sing-songy performance of all of her lines.
So yeah, and again, I think it goes back to like she's just, it's reluctant acceptance of the new situation. She's disappointed that she can't use her exocomps as tools anymore. And I think that, she's saying like, yes, as a scientist, it is interesting and I am going to pursue it. And I'm sure eventually I will be excited about it, but I just lost my tools, man. Can you let me be sad about it for a day?
Or how about you pivot to finding the holy grail of robotics in this particular, like, how about you pivot to that?
Tomato, man. You're just a glass half full kind of guy.
I guess so. Especially since she talked about how important all this crap was to her.
Well, yeah, as a tool. Now she's the tool.
Boy, is she. All right. What happens next in this podcast? We have to decide if it's actually yes. It is a Star Trek, a good Star Trek episode.
Yeah. It's the best Next Generation we've seen so far. Solid sci-fi episode, but there wasn't a whole lot of layers to like moral dilemmas. Because Data is going to make the right choice. It's not as much fun when Data has to make the choice. It's cool because he's right and he's a dick, but it's not, he doesn't struggle with it at all.
Well, I like the idea that he did struggle, but in terms of computers struggling, like for example in First Contact,
Right.
when he's trying to decide whether or not he's going to betray Picard, he says it took me 0.76 seconds, whatever he says.
Yeah.
And he says, but to an android, that's a lifetime. And I think that he probably had the same kind of moment in this, where he was going to sacrifice Picard and Geordi, his two best friends, or not really, his one best friend and also some other
His
guy.
commanding officer,
Yeah.
the one who defended him.
Yeah, exactly. Expendable. Expendable. So I don't know. I think it had just as many layers as it needed to have. I don't think it was lacking for me. I appreciated almost every moment of this episode. I felt like it's what I want my science fiction to be.
Sure. And I know, and I think that's where you and I differ a little bit. I like the humanity side of things a little bit more. And I think that Star Trek, a really good Star Trek episode, Next Generation, has the sci-fi and it has the moral dilemma. Like the best of both worlds, when Commander Riker, like the cliffhanger where he says fire, like,
Yeah.
That's an amazing moment.
Yeah. Although we have seen them up against the Borg before, and usually firing on them does nothing. So it's not, if you really think about it, it's like, nothing happens after that usually. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But, anyway, so the point being where they actually do have a moral dilemma that is discussed usually in the captain's quarters. Sometimes in the writing room. Like those are the ones that I thoroughly enjoy. So
yeah. All right. Well,
cool.
Let's see what's next, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Ha-ha! Star Trek Voyager.
Okay.
Season 6, Episode 21.
Wow.
Live Fast and Furious. No.
Guest starring Vin Diesel.
Live Fast. Actually, The Rock is in a Voyager episode.
I
Not
know.
this one, though. Live Fast and Prosper. Original air date, April 19th, 2000. 2000. Huh. I had to reorient myself there for a second. Anyway, a clever trio of identity thieves claiming to be Janeway, Chakotay, and Tuvok makes trades all over the quadrant and gives Voyager a bad name. Because that's what they should care about, is getting a bad name.
Right? And that's the thing about like Voyager in general. Like I said, they're on the way out. It really doesn't matter.
And these are like hundreds, thousands, millions of light years. I mean, like it's not like it's a town that they have to travel through.
Right. And they're not coming back.
Yeah, exactly. But we're already critiquing my favorite show on the planet.
Just based on the blurb and this wonderful thumbnail of
is it Janeway?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah, it's like
It's like stepping out of the shower or something.
yeah, it's like a sick Janeway seeing herself in the mirror and realizing that she looks way more terrible than she thought she did. So, all right, let's go watch it.
Okay.